This is a special edition. It is on Learning the Instructions of God, Part 1. If you have not watched the introduction, please go back and watch it. It's only 11 minutes, and it sets the stage for the things that we're going to be discussing. We're talking about the instructions of God, i.e. the law, i.e. the Torah. That is what the word Torah means, is instructions. And these are the instructions that God gave to Moses at Mount Sinai. He did not just give 10 commandments, he gave much more than that. He continued on giving commandments after the tablets were made. This listing that we're going to be going through is all the commandments that apply to the average person. So, therefore, the temple will not be included in this list, as there is no temple and it cannot be applied. Anything related to the temple has been removed. Also, slavery in the Bible, which is hired servitude, and you are set free in 7 years, is also removed because it does not apply to the average person. And anything that is specific to just the land of Israel, that has also been removed. This listing also applies to male and female. It is put in book order and it goes by verse. And by the end of this, we will land on a number for the Bible verses with commandments that apply to the average person. So the very first commandment that we have that applies to the average person is in Genesis. Genesis 1, verse 28. This is talking about reproduction in regards to humans and what we are supposed to do. Then God blessed them, that being Adam and Eve. And God said to them, "Be fruitful and multiply. Fill the earth and subdue it. Have dominion over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the air, and over every living thing that moves on the earth." So with this verse, we have what God has set in place, the mechanism of reproduction. And every single person on this planet has that system built into them. And we are commanded to be fruitful and multiply from this commandment passed on from Adam and Eve. And also in this verse, we get the control of the earth. We get the control of the animals on this planet, including the fish in the sea. Number 2, Genesis 17, verse 10. This is on circumcising one's son. And it says, "This is my covenant which you shall keep between me and you and your descendants after you. Every male child among you shall be circumcised." And this is a Abrahamic covenant. And so this is actually dealing with the land grant for the promised land. It was not a nation called Israel at that time, but Abraham came out of Babylon. He came out of the pagan world. He came out of worshiping false gods, and he made a covenant with God to be blessed and to possess the land, which is the promised land, which is actually a lot bigger than just the nation of Israel. It extends down to Saudi Arabia, and it goes up to Syria, and it goes as far as the Tigris and Euphrates River. So it is quite a big chunk of land, and that is what the Abrahamic covenant is. So if you want to partake in that land covenant, you will have to be circumcised as a male. Number 3, Genesis 9, verse 3, food and ownership, in which it states, "Every moving thing that lives shall be food for you. I have given you all things, even the green herbs." This is talking about God has given you things to eat, and the green herbs specifically are for food. It's also important to point out here that there are other verses that will come into play later in this listing that will show you the clean versus unclean foods. God goes into detail what is considered food and what is not considered food. And we are going to rely on God to tell us what is food and what is not food. Just because you can stick it in your mouth and swallow it does not make it food, biblically speaking. Number 4, Genesis chapter 9, verse 4. This is talking about blood. The verse states, "But you shall not eat the flesh with its life, that is, its blood." So this is the commandment that says we cannot be consuming blood. There are many dishes out there that people add blood to their food, or they'll congeal blood and they'll eat it, or they'll drink blood. This is a very pagan practice, and God is telling us, do not be drinking the blood. That is where the life is. And plus, this is very significant because the blood cries out from Abel. Jesus's blood, his blood is so significant. The animal sacrifice always had blood being placed on the ark. Blood is life, and it shows that the death penalty is owed. So we are not to consume blood. And I would like to point out that when an animal is slaughtered and its blood is drained from it, there is a fluid that's left in the muscles. And so that's why when you get steak, your steak has this red juice about it. That is not blood. That is a muscle juice that looks similar to blood, but it's technically not blood. So do not be afraid to eat your steak. However, do not be consuming blood. Number 5, Genesis chapter 9, verse 6, capital punishment, in which it states, "Whoever sheds man's blood, by man his blood shall be shed, for in the image of God he made man." So this is saying that if a man is a murderer and sheds blood, he shall also be put to death. There will be other commandments and other verses that come into play on how you go about executing this punishment of capital punishment. And you are to have 2 witnesses, and they are supposed to go before the judges, and they are supposed to present their case. And if they're found guilty, then they can be put to death. But it's very important. You have to have 2 witnesses. If you don't have 2 witnesses, you cannot actually execute this punishment. Number 6, Exodus 20, verse 3, "No other gods," in which it states, "You shall have no other gods before me." This concept "before me" is in his face in the Hebrew. So you are to have no other gods in his face. And actually, there's other commandments that come in and say you really shouldn't even be saying the other gods' names unless you're dealing with it in educational purposes. That's always an obvious. You have to tell people what not to do and what not to say and why you should stay away from them. But we are not to worship these other gods. It is detestable to God. Number 7, Exodus 20, verse 4. "Do not make graven images." This is a very important one because people have done it, in which it states, "You shall not make unto you any graven image or any likeness of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water underneath the earth." Now, does this mean you can't make any toys? You can't make any coins? No, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about for the purposes of worship. You are not to make any images of any creatures and you start worshiping them. And as this is being given at Mount Sinai from Exodus 20, shortly after, you have the Israelites and the mixed multitudes, the Egyptians, the Moabites, the probably some Edomites and some Jethroites, all mixed there at Mount Sinai. It's very important to say it is a mixed multitude. And shortly after they got this commandment, they broke it. They broke it with the golden calf worship. So they didn't make it very far and they already messed up. So we are to not make any creatures to worship. Number 8, Exodus 20, verse 5. Do not bow down to any idol. And this coincides with the previous commandment. You shall not bow down yourself to them, nor serve them, for I, in the English it says Lord, in all caps, that is Jehovah, your God, or Jehovah, your God in the English, am a jealous God, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. So we are not to bow down to these idols, which are not even real. They're just created man worship, man religion. They're fake. They're dead. There's nothing in them. It's just pretending, and it hurts God, and it will hurt you as well, because God will see that and he will visit your iniquity. Number 9, Exodus 20, verse 7, not taking the holy name in vain. And this is what it says. You shall not take the name Jehovah your God in vain, for Jehovah will not hold him guiltless that taketh the name in vain. People have a lot of misconceptions on what it means to take the name in vain. Using the name is not taking the name in vain. Using God's name is following what God said. God said for us to use his name. He said to swear by his name, make oaths in his name, pray in his name, call out to him in the name of his name. We are to use it. That's not taking it in vain. In ancient Hebrew, the word for vain is sheva, which means empty, but is also a synonym for false. The ancient Israelites used to open their vows with, as Jehovah lives. Following those words, they would lie, which would be taking God's name falsely or in vain. So the background behind taking God's name in vain is swearing an oath falsely, to lie behind God's name. That is taking it to yourself and lying. That is what it means to take God's name in vain. Number 10, Exodus 20, verse 8. This is on the Sabbath, and it states, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. And I want to point out here that there is another verse in Deuteronomy, which we will get to, that deals with this exact same verse, but instead of remember, it says to observe. So when you put these together, you are to remember the Sabbath and you are to observe the Sabbath, to keep it holy, because God rested on the seventh day and we are to rest as well, because you're recreating the celebration every single week of creation and the work that God has done to make this planet and the universe. And I will say that this is actually one of the hard ones for majority of people out there that follow the Bible, because society is not set up for keeping the Sabbath. Unless you live in Israel, then it's actually quite easy. But in the Bible, it says that the Sabbath is the sign of your covenant with God. So I encourage everyone out there to rest on the seventh day. And notice I didn't say worship on the seventh day. You could worship any day you like. You can worship every day if you like. However, the Sabbath is a day of rest. The Bible is quite clear on that. And it's also important to note that Jesus, or Yeshua, rested on the Sabbath. He did not violate any of these commandments, which we will go through. What he did violate is oral Torah, which is the Pharisees' man-made law. The Pharisees had all these extra commandments that they created to keep people safe on the Sabbath. They are not supposed to add to or take away from the Torah. It's also important to note that all of the disciples kept the Sabbath. And after Jesus left, they continued to keep the Sabbath. They continued to keep the law. And you can see a lot of early church fathers still keeping the Sabbath. Number 11, Exodus 20, verse 9. Working. This is a commandment right here. Most people don't think this is a commandment. It says, 6 days you shall labor and do all of your work. So, I know people don't want to hear this, especially if they get their Saturdays and Sundays off. They like to take 2 days of rest. But this right here says 6 days you shall labor. So technically, it's a commandment to work 6 days. I actually do work, but I do my work in other ways. So I work a job that's Monday through Friday, but on Sunday, I will find something to do that I consider to be laborious. Number 12, Exodus 20, verse 10. No working or causing of work, in which it states, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work, you nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. This commandment is dealing with not to cause other people to work on the Sabbath. There are many other verses that go along with this and paints the full picture, but they're not in the Torah, they're actually in the prophets. And I would like to point you to the last chapter of Nehemiah, in which it talks about no buying or no selling on the Sabbath, which would cause someone to work. Continuing on. Number 13, Exodus 20, verse 12, honoring your parents. This is a very important verse that people just forget about. Honor your father and your mother, that your days may be long upon the land which Jehovah your God gives to you. What does it mean to honor your mother and father? Do you just state, I honor them? Do you just behave in a very nice and well-mannered behavior? Do you just rely on there being a Mother's and Father's Day, and you are to give them gifts on that day out of the year? That is not what the ancient Israelites understood this verse. This verse is supposed to mean take care of your father, take care of your mother, and you take care of them into their old age. That is why it says that your days may be long, and that is for the parents. The parents will have old age. They will live long because the children will take care of the parents. Number 14, Exodus 20, verse 13. No murdering, in which it states, you shall not murder. This is a very important verse. Notice it does not say you shall not kill. It says you shall not murder. There is a difference. When you're defending yourself and someone dies, you did not murder them, you killed them. When you accidentally drop something and it hits someone on the head and they die, that is not murder, that is kill. It's an accident. And we have a process in the Bible that takes care of the accidental deaths. It's called manslayer. And they set up cities of refuge for those people to go to so that they can start again. Because it's very difficult living with something like that, accidentally killing someone. So, you shall not murder. That means you are not to go after someone and kill an innocent person. There is an exception to military in not murdering. The Bible makes it clear that God has commanded people with armies to go and kill other people. And a lot of times the academic world, the mainstream talking points is look how mean and oppressive it is to have this God telling the Israelites to go and kill all these innocent people. Well, these people are not innocent. These people are pagans. They're doing child sacrifice, and they are wicked to the core. So they are actually doing God's work when they are executing these very guilty, wicked, murderous people. Number 15, Exodus 20, verse 14. Do not cheat, in which it states, you shall not commit adultery. This is a very strict commandment not to commit adultery. Adultery is cheating on your spouse that you are married to. And this word adultery is also related to idolatry, which links us back to no other gods, because idolatry is also cheating on God. We are to be connected to him and having a relationship with him. Number 16, Exodus 20, verse 15, stealing. We are not to steal. You shall not steal is what it says. Period, paragraph. If it does not belong to you, it's not yours. Number 17, Exodus 20, verse 16, lying, in which it states, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. That means do not lie about anyone. Do not lie. There are other verses that go into lying and stating falsehoods and such. But this one is saying don't lie against each other. Lying is bad, and it only hurts the people around you. And also God is watching, and he knows when you're lying. And don't forget, every idle word is recorded. Do you want those lies to be recorded against your record? Would you like to face them when they take out the book of works and show them to you on Judgment Day? I wouldn't want that on my conscience. Number 18, Exodus 20, verse 17, not coveting another man's possessions or property, in which it states, you shall not covet your neighbor's house, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his ox, nor his ass, that is a donkey, nor anything that is your neighbor's. So don't be looking on to your neighbor's house or the people around you. It's not just your neighbor's house. The word neighbor represents all the people around you. Don't be looking at them and saying, I want what he has, because it could lead to other things. It could lead to you lying about that person. It could lead to you stealing from that person. It could lead to you murdering that person. So you stay in your lane. You focus on what you have. You focus on what God is blessing you. And you don't be envious and wanting what other people have, because it could grow to something bad. It's okay to look at someone and be positive and say, man, those guys are great. God bless them. God has blessed them with so much, and that is a good thing. Praise God. As opposed to, why do they have all that stuff? I should have all that stuff. That is where the evil starts in your heart. Number 19, Exodus 20, verse 23. And this is talking about idols, in which it states, you shall not make anything to be with me gods of silver or gods of gold. You shall not make for yourselves. So this commandment is talking about making gods, false gods, idols, statues, and bowing down and worshiping alongside with our one true God in the form of gold and silver. And of course, you have the mixed multitudes violating this by making a golden calf very shortly after this. Number 20, Exodus 21, verse 10, withhold not from a wife, in which it states, if he take him another wife, and there's circumstances where he might be taking a wife in. Maybe his brother's wife died and she has to own the property and she might lose everything. So there are circumstances when a family member could take another wife or take her in. And this is stating not to withhold anything from her. Don't withhold food from her. It says her food, her remnant, and her duty of marriage shall not be diminished. So you're not to withhold and treat her less than. This is uplifting the woman and saying, don't be mistreating them. Number 21, Exodus 21, verse 12, murder and punishment, in which it states, he who strikes a man so that he dies shall surely be put to death. So this is not to murder and that he will be put to death. This is the death penalty. And this is all talking about someone who has struck another man and has murdered him, that he will be put to death. Number 22, Exodus 21, verse 15, striking your parents. It's a complete no-no. And this is what it says, and he who strikes his father or his mother shall surely be put to death. This is dealing with the ancient Israelites and the mixed multitudes being in the desert with God himself. And he is stating, you do not put your hands on your parents. You do not do that at all. And of course, you have to have 2 witnesses, and then you can actually do the death penalty. And we do not have any recorded times in the Bible where this was actually executed. Number 23, Exodus 21, verse 16, kidnapping. Absolute no kidnapping. And this is what it says, he who kidnaps a man and sells him, or if he is found in his hand, shall surely be put to death. You cannot kidnap people. Biblically speaking, you should be put to death if you kidnap someone. So all those people who were kidnapping and selling them and starting slavery around the world by kidnapping people, that is 100% illegal and 100% against God's commandments. The only way for you to be a slave in biblical sense is that you willingly offer yourself up to be a servant. If you did not do that, then you are not a slave in a biblical sense. You were kidnapped and you are a victim. This is the one I want to end on because it is such a powerful commandment. And I think it's a very terrible thing for people to say that the commandments have been done away with or the law has been done away with. Can you sit there and honestly say that a verse like this, that you are not supposed to kidnap people and sell them into slavery, that verse should be done away with, or that verse has been done away with? This is the number I would like to end on. We're going to pick up from here on part 2. I will encourage everyone to share this video out and help others understand what the actual rules and regulations, the instructions of God are. What does it say? What is the nuances behind it? And how am I to live it today? So thank you for joining me. I hope God blesses you and keeps you and make his face shine upon you.